Hey everyone, quick programming note. We talked for just a little bit too long this week about Hamilton, so what we're going to do is actually split this episode up into two. So now you're going to listen to the first half of the episode, and then next week we'll play the second half. On with the show. Hello everyone, welcome to the Writing Easy podcast. A podcast that tries to take the act of writing, which can sometimes be not easy, and make it just a little bit easier. I'm one of your hosts, Mary Mascari.
And I'm your other host, Melissa Long.
So we are recording this on July 4th. A momentous occasion. Birth of our country and all that good stuff. But yesterday, Hamilton came out on Disney Plus, and so we are actually incapable of talking about anything but Hamilton. But there's a lot to be said by that. Now, no, Melissa, had you seen it? You've seen it live before, right?
Yes, yeah. I saw it when it was in Chicago.
Oh, good.
And I had tickets to see it in New York, but I did not get to go. I had to sell the tickets. But yes, I did. I have seen it live. It was fantastic.
Good. Yeah, I live in Chicago, or in the Chicago area, so we were totally spoiled because it was in Chicago for years, and so I saw it. I saw it 4 times.
I would have. If I had lived in Chicago, I would have seen it 4 times. I tried. I definitely tried to see it multiple times when I was in New York. Did not work out.
Yeah. The theater in Chicago is much bigger than the theater in New York, too. That helps. But anyway, the reason we want to talk about it on a writing... Well, the reason we want to talk about it is because it's freaking incredible. But the reason we're talking about it on a writing podcast is there's a lot to learn from Hamilton. A lot to talk about. It brings up a lot of things. The content of the show, I know for me, has been both inspirational and a little problematic sometimes. And then the creation of the show and Lin Manuel Miranda as a creator and how he talks about his process and things like that. There's a lot here, and we both freaking love the musical, so we're going to talk about it. I hope you don't have a problem with it. The hard part will be making sure that we don't burst out into any lyrics.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
Yeah. But I think it's perfect timing because we just wrapped up Big Magic. And I know we had that conversation about what does Big Magic mean to us? When does that happen? And I said it's when these like super amazing once in a lifetime projects come about. This is a perfect example of how I view Big Magic. I mean, there's just layer upon layer upon layer of miracles coming together to make this show happen in the way that it did at the time that it did. So yeah, I feel like it's a perfect sequel from what we just talked about with Elizabeth Gilbert and Big Magic.
We planned it that way,
Almost.
Which we totally did. Of course we did.
Of course we did.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about the show itself first, or do you want to get meta and talk about like the creative around it?
Let's talk about the show itself first, and let's give people a recap. I feel like everybody should know about this show, but I was just having a conversation with my best friend. She's like, I haven't seen it. I don't have Disney Plus. I don't know very much about it. And I'm like, how are we friends?
I know, right? First of all, if you don't know it, like if you don't have Disney Plus, first of all, I think you can get like a trial membership for $7. So you could like buy the membership, watch the show, and then end it for $7. So, I mean... Yeah, but you can also just listen to the soundtrack, which is basically free all over the place. And if you just kind of sit, and your headphones on and listen to it, you get a lot of the work there. So definitely recommended.
Yeah, and the lyrics are everywhere. You can get copies of the lyrics too if you want to read along as you listen to it.
Which is a good idea because there's so much there. The lyrics are brilliant. I mean, the as a lyricist, I think is Lin's his biggest strength is these lyrics are just gorgeous. They're so well crafted and so, they're so good. And you will also weep like a crazy person at the end. So the story, Alexander Hamilton, orphan, from the Caribbean, from Nevis, comes to America, meets Aaron Burr, meets Lafayette, I'm going through the music, the numbers, you see. Lafayette, Lawrence, and Hercules Mulligan joins the revolution, fights in the Revolutionary War, marries Elizabeth Schuyler, but there's also kind of a attraction between him and Eliza's sister, Angelica. He becomes Treasury Secretary after the war, they win the war. Is enemies with Thomas Jefferson. He messes up and has an affair with Maria Reynolds, then her husband starts extorting him, so he's been paying him off. Jefferson is one of his big political enemies, and Burr, in the meanwhile, is like kind of all around and trying to get in to be influential and just can't ever do it, until finally he runs for president, and in the way it happens, Hamilton ends up siding with Jefferson instead. This is the election of 1800. I'm going way too fast. Burr takes offense and challenges him to a duel, and then Burr kills Alexander Hamilton in a duel. Spoiler. If you saw that peanut butter or that milk commercial, you know this. Any history.
Did you know
and they
anything,
say at
though?
the beginning. What?
Like, did you know anything about Hamilton before this musical came out?
Only that he was shot by Aaron Burr, and only because of that milk commercial.
Yeah.
That was all I had. Yeah, killed in a duel. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Killed in a duel? That's nuts. So everything else I had no idea. Yeah. But one of the things that drives Alexander Hamilton, he's just like super high energy, super driven, and there's a whole song about, and there's a lyric, why do you write like you're running out of time? Or how do you write every second you're alive? And they talk about how he works really hard and he's so prolific, and he just totally intense and nonstop all the time. And I know as a writer, hearing the words, how do you write like you're running out of time? I'm like, yeah, you know what? I am running out of time. I need to write like I'm running out of time. And that inspired me and also put some pressure on me too.
Yeah. I think that was the first song that I resonated with because of being a writer. And I was in this frenzied, I was doing self-publishing at the time. So I was in this frenzied state of like, I was constantly working and writing all the time. And there was a big push to you had to publish 3 things all at once to be able to beat the algorithms and all of these, everybody was about how to write 10,000 words a day. And so that song connected with me on a deep level because I was like, yes, I feel like I'm writing like nonstop all the time, every day, every second. And I could just connect to those lyrics in that sense of like, I want to accomplish something, but I feel like I'm running out of time, and I feel like I have to spend every waking moment doing this thing.
And for me, it had the reverse effect where I was like, Mary, you are not writing like you're running out of time, and you need to start. That doesn't work very well. But so I think, to look at this character as an author, I think the musical takes his drive and really shows you both sides of it. There's no clear good guy or bad guy. Even Burr isn't a bad guy in this. It really just sort of tells the story of what happens. I guess Jefferson's a bad guy. But even so, even the things he talks about of why he doesn't like Hamilton, you're like, yeah, I could buy that. So it's never said, look, he worked so hard and look how great it is. It's like he worked so hard and it ruined his marriage, and then he, and he was completely, made some really bad decisions, and you saw that happen. So it was an interesting way of looking at the creative process and how, the good and bad of it.
Right. And I think because he came from a non-traditional background, right? He was an immigrant. He was an orphan. Like, he came into money through marriage. He fought through the war. Like, all of those things gave him a different background and perspective than the rest of the founding fathers. So it's really interesting to not only see a story from his perspective of somebody who has history is kind of forgotten about. Like, we really were like, oh yeah, there was this duel-ish thing.
He almost came off a $10 bill.
Right? So there's that piece of it, but there's also this piece that like he, because of that, he didn't play by the rules. He created his own rules. And the way that this story is written, you really see him having a lot of confidence and ego and hubris and just like going at it. And he's like, I don't care what you say. I'm gonna say what I believe in, and I'm gonna stand up for something, and I'm gonna carve my own path. And that was both his rise and his fall.
Right. And it's very inspiring, you know, to see someone say, I'm doing my way. And, yeah, that it can be very encouraging. But also, you know, the flip side, it can take you too far and can really screw you up.
Yeah. So this musical is based off of a biography, right? And it's mostly historically accurate. There are some discrepancies.
He talks about how they do move things around a little bit for narrative purpose. They combine some things and move some things up, like the whole idea of Angelica. Angelica was actually married when she met Hamilton, and the thing about, oh, my father has no sons, so I'm the one who has to social climb for one. He had plenty of sons. He had like 13, and you know, they made it seem like Philip was their only child, and absolutely not. They just had piles of children. Like, so yeah, they simplified some things. The election at the end, they kind of, you know, compress it.
So how do you feel about that? Because I saw a tweet yesterday that Ava DuVernay like retweeted, and there was some debate around the excitement of Hamilton because they're like, it's not historically accurate, and like people are painting him as this like hero when he was incredibly complicated and he owned slaves and he did like they're pulling him apart from the other founding fathers when like he also had his faults, right? He had a lot of faults, and it's not, and like I said, not entirely historically accurate because they took dramatic, you know, license to tell a good story. I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on that, especially when you think about how you adapt something historical and give it appeal and structure in a written form?
It's tricky, right? Because if you do something like that, and I like to write historical fiction a lot. Like I even if it's not strictly historical, I'll pull historical details, and you know, you're always aware that this may be where a reader learns about this, right? This might be their very first or only or strongest impression of this event, and you feel some responsibility there. You know, responsibility to get it right, responsibility to honor the source material. I mean, these are people's actual lives. These are real human beings we're talking about here. At the same time, you are not writing a biography. Ron Chernow wrote a biography. It's huge. And, you know, people read it, but not tons. Whereas I think you do have to, I think you are allowed to make changes as long as you don't change the spirit of it. You know, if they were to suddenly make Hamilton look like a completely different kind of person, I don't think that would be fair. You know, is to wildly change the things, but to, you know, to compress and to convey and to even, I think even to glamorize a little bit. I think that's okay. You know, I mean, it's hard to say, you know, but you have to. And I honestly, like, I think Hamilton would be fine with it. I think you have to do it carefully. You have to, you can't do it recklessly, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. I think I agree. You know, I think about the way, the very deliberate way in which the show is produced and staged and designed, right? It's like, it's a historical story. It almost feels like it's set in modern times because the music is modern and the cast is diverse, and it's, even the stage settings is different. It's not like they're not trying to create, you know, that time period. Yes, it's very stylized, and you could feel like you could just be watching this like in a clean theater, like, or like in a backlot somewhere right now in 2020. So I think there's like those choices also help remind people that this is a fictionalized version based off of true events versus we're trying to create a documentary. We're trying to educate you on the facts of what happened. And then also, what is fact? Because I think that like, what is history? History is like whoever took the time to capture that information. But like, history is made by the people who win, right? Like and it's told and retold by the victors. And so there's part of me, as I've been doing a period piece and trying to do research, that gets really frustrated because I'm like, you have to fill in a lot of gaps. Like, you don't have a lot of these full stories. And so it's almost a necessity to try and weave things together and make sense of it in a narrative fashion so that people aren't watching and totally confused or left unsatisfied. Not satisfied.
And Lin Manuel Miranda kind of points to that in the story itself. Because, you know, the whole thing of who lives, who dies, who tells your story, right? At the end, who tells his story, it's, well, first you're like, oh yeah, it's Eliza. Then you realize, no, who's telling his story? It's these people on the stage right now. That's who's telling, like, so it's very meta. Yeah. And I think he calls it out. He says, yeah, now you have no control who lives, who dies, who tells your story. And who's telling his story now is Lin Manuel Miranda, and he's going to do it his way. And that's part of it as well. And there, I think we have to just stop. Next week, you'll hear the rest of our conversation.